I always tell people you have to be able to recycle your money.
It's still a good deal. I mean, in a normal deal, you put down 25% and see you later.
I was definitely in over my head, and this was my first real BRRRR. Welcome back to the Sky's the Limit podcast with your hosts, Mike and Ryan. Today, we're going to be talking about something really, really exciting, helped us scale our portfolio, the BRRRR strategy.
This is my favorite strategy. I'm really excited to talk about. I think it's the most crucial way to learn and understand to how to scale your portfolio. That's the number one question a lot of investors have is they buy a property or two and then they're like, okay, I ran out of money. How do I scale? And this exact formula, we'll call it BRRRR method, which we'll get into exactly what it stands for, how it works, will allow you to scale and kind of recoup all your original down payment. So I'm really excited to get into it. What's going on in the portfolio?
Jeez, I feel like I always lead off with a loss. Do I have to do it? Are you going to make me do it?
Let's hear the loss this week.
All right. Our other Farmington, Connecticut property, I got to say, this is all on us.
Yeah.
I mean, it's always our fault, right? But this one's really on us. Like, we bought that property knowing this could potentially be an issue. And I have to admit, like, if you were to ask me, like, what my biggest fear is, like, with our portfolio, it might just be this, and it kind of is happening.
It's coming to life.
So our biggest tenant at that particular property that pays 40% of the rent roll has been hinting at potentially leaving and just recently told us that they did find another space that they're extremely interested in. And more or less, if we don't basically meet those new terms that they found with another landlord, they're considering leaving.
Yeah. So for all the listeners out there, we have a 8,000 square foot shared office building in Farmington, Connecticut. There's probably, 20 or something tenants, many of them just a couple hundred square foot small offices, but there's this one engineering tenant that Ryan's referring to, and they occupy, probably 40% of the building in one space. And they were, we never renewed their lease because they're great tenants. We didn't want to rock the boat, but, lesson learned. And now they want to downsize. And so we're going to try to keep them as tenants, but we're also in the midst of selling the building. And so got a couple offers already, but I mean, those offers are going to completely change now. The fact that this largest tenant's going to go. So
tell me I'm wrong about this.
What?
Every time we go to sell something happens.
Dude, I could not agree more because obviously I sell other people's portfolios, other buildings, and I feel like the sales go relatively smooth. I go to sell one of our own buildings, like, what the fuck? It's like nothing goes right. Nothing goes right.
Right.
I don't get it.
It'll be fully occupied and just humming along the day before we decide to sell it. Day we decide to sell it, and we're doing showings. It's like, oh, so-and-so's leaving. Oh, so-and-so didn't pay. And it's like, we're honest people. Like, we want to disclose all these things. And it's like, any offers we got, like you just said, like they're going to change.
I already did. And so now they'll come back to us with a new proposed offer. But I guess silver lining here is that hopefully we keep the tenant, agree to some sort of lease term, obviously put them on a lease now, long-term lease, and see if we can still sell the thing.
Yeah. And also something we're considering is like not a lot of the offers, but some of the offers they've hinted at owner occupancy, right?
Yeah.
Like,
so that would be...
Yeah. So they would potentially move their own business in, like the new buyer, right? So they might want that space. So it's like, do we try to keep them? It's tricky. It's
an art and a science.
It's part of the game.
Yeah. But today's show, the BRRRR model, I'm such a fan, proponent, and I cannot emphasize this strategy enough. So what it stands for, the BRRRR, so BRRRR,
Yep.
Buy, renovate, rent, refinance, repeat. And so we want to really break down that BRRRR and what every step of that looks like. So when you buy a property, typically you put 20% down. It's rather turnkey, for the most part, and you go on your merry way. But then eventually you'll run out of money because you have to keep putting 20% down. So the whole principle and the purpose behind the BRRRR model is that you're going to buy somewhat of a distressed property or under market value, and you're going to add value through leasing or construction or renting out of some sort. And so you are able to then refinance the building and pull out your initial 20% or your initial down payment, whatever that may be. And by doing that, there's a lot of benefits to doing it, but the number one benefit is you get to recoup your money, and then you can go do that on another property. So you put it down, you put down your down payment, you renovate it, you rent it out, if it's vacant at the time, and then you go to a new bank and you ask them to get you a new loan, and you pay off the existing loan with that new loan balance. And we'll break it down step by step, but that's basically the principle. And we've done it a number of times, and it's allowed us to really scale our portfolio because we just reuse the same capital. Oh, and by the way, that when you do a refinance, it's tax-free money. So it's pretty sweet too. So
that's probably the best part. Yeah.
Let's talk about some ways that you can use a hard money to initially buy it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's actually really interesting. So yesterday, just before I get into that, somebody called me off of Facebook, because I talk to a lot of people on Facebook about lending. If they post that they're looking for a lender, I always reach out and try to help them. And this guy, it's funny. It'll be funny if he listens to this, because I was telling him, like, I cannot believe you're telling me this story. Like, tomorrow I'm recording a show on our podcast, and we're going to be talking about this exact thing. So I won't go too far into his deal, but like, he has a duplex in Manchester, and he just came to me for some lending advice, and I quoted him some terms, and basically he thought his property was going to be worth like $345,000, and I said I could give him up to 75%
of that total value
of that new as is value, because he put in like 60 grand in work, right?
Yep.
So he really did a lot over the last like 6 months of his ownership. And I said, 75% of 345 is like 258, and he owed 225, which is like, $33,000 or something. I was like, after closing, let's just be honest, you're going to walk away with 20, maybe a little more. And he's like, well, my down payment was like 40. He's like, I know this is like my first deal, but like, that's not like, I'm not going to get all my money back. And I'm like, this is what we're going to be talking about. You shouldn't feel like you'd have to, but we'll get into that. But the whole thing with purchasing these things is obviously you want to buy it for the right price. That's like the most important thing of any transaction, whether it's a BRRRR or not. But I cannot stress this enough. Unless you have very deep pockets, right? I strongly recommend doing a hard money loan. I cannot begin to tell you how many people have come to me that bought a property cash, ran out of money in the rehab process, and now are trying to do a refinance and rehab when they should have just done a purchase and rehab loan.
Yeah, people get really hung up on the points. So typically 1 point is 1% of the loan amount. So if you're buying a $100,000 house and the lender's charging you 1 point, that's $1,000. So obviously if you're buying a $500,000 house, multiply that times 5. So typically hard money loans are 1 to 2 points of the loan amount, but you'll finance 100% of the rehab.
That's the biggest part.
That's the biggest part. And you pull on that money through a process called the draw, and but you don't have to use any of your own capital. And
exactly.
And that also allows you to do multiple projects at once.
That's the biggest thing. We're funding 100% of your rehab. So like, let's just talk about how that's done, because a lot of people are like, all right, cool. So I'm going to do like $50,000 in rehab. So you're just going to give me like a $50,000 check at closing, right? It's like, no, definitely not. So I want to break that down real quick. The rehab portion of a hard money loan is normally done on draws, right? It's done on a draw basis. So like what we do in particular is that the work that you're doing is going to be all submitted on a particular like rehab budget sheet, right? Like before the loan closes, we're going to have your budget on lockdown. Like we've already cleared it with underwriting. It looks good. We're going to roll with this thing, right? So let's just say you've got on line number 10 roof, you're going to spend $10,000. When that roof is done, call us up, say, hey, line number 10 roof on my budget is done. We're going to come out and check it, make sure it's done. We're not going to inspect it. Like, we're not inspectors. We're not going to come see if you did it right. We just want to see that it's done. After that, you're going to get a wire into your account a couple of days later, and you move on. You move on to the next item.
The only downside is that you have to know. So obviously, if a contractor's doing the work, a lot of times they require some upfront money. And that draw process that you just described, you're not getting that capital reimbursed until after the work is done. So a lot of times, at least when I was like flipping and doing the BRRRR process, adding that value through construction, I had to front a lot of that rehab cost, and then I get reimbursed because the contractor wanted 50% up front. So that's the tricky thing is obviously you want to still have some working capital to pay your contractors and your laborers, and then you'll get reimbursed afterwards. Because,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of ways you can do that. I don't recommend a cash advance on your credit card, but there's a lot of ways. Like you just gotta have to make it work.
Yeah.
You could take out a small loan at a bank, just an unsecured loan, or like I said, like a credit card I've certainly used before. There's a lot of ways to skin that cat.
I think the biggest hurdle for me understanding the BRRRR process was the whole refinance part. I think that's the most confusing, and I want to spend some time on it. So buying a property, you can buy it multiple ways. Pretty simple. You renovate the property. Again, hire a contractor unless you're a contractor yourself. Like I would advise, hire out so that you can focus on other money-making activities. And then you rent it out. So you've added value to this property. It was distressed. Now now hopefully it's turnkey at this point after construction. And now you're going to go put in a tenant. Say it's a 2-family house. You're going to rent out each unit for, let's just say $1,000. So let's say you buy a $100,000 house. You put in $20,000 worth of work. And now you can rent out each unit for $1,000. Great. Now it's cash flowing. Right?
Mm-hmm.
You still have this hard money loan if you used it, or maybe you paid cash for it, but you're still in this hard money loan. You've rented it out and now it's performing. And now what you're going to do is you're going to literally call a bank and say, hey, I have a property and I would like to do a cash out refinance. And then they're going to say, great, okay, let's start the loan process with this new bank. We're going to send out an appraiser and we're going to see what this property is worth after you fix it up. It's performing, it's rented out, you have stable tenants, you have leases, it's cash flowing, and they're going to send out an appraiser and they're going to say, okay, the appraiser is going to go out and based on sales comparison approach, if it's residential, based on what it looks like now and other properties have sold similar to it, it's now worth $200,000, let's say. And they will give you a loan 75% of that value. So if it's worth $200,000, they'll give you 75% of that. You then take that new loan and you pay off the existing hard money loan. And now you have a nice, clean 30-year loan with hopefully not, and it's okay to have some of your money in the loan, but hopefully not a lot of your own capital into that deal. And that's what's scalable.
So, yes, exactly right. Let me go back a little bit on what you just said, though.
Okay.
So, two things I want to touch on. Seasoning period.
Yes,
right.
Good call.
Really good point to make here. So, and banks are different. Like, so this, like, you gotta make your calls. You gotta see what the seasoning period is. But like, let's just say you fly through the rehab in 30 days. Like, okay, great, good. Most banks are not going to refi you out after 30 days. So what we do is, if you have purchased, this is another thing about cash. If you have purchased the property originally via a loan, hard money, whatever, don't care. As long as it wasn't cash, if you purchased it via a loan, we can refi you out in 3 months, 90 days.
Wow.
If you have done it via cash, which everyone loves to do, right? Buy properties in cash, it's 6 months.
Minimum 6 months.
And
so
that's pretty standard.
You have to own the property 6 months before a new bank will even look at it.
Right. So if you're paying 9, 10, 12, 13% to your hard money lender, like, you got to factor in, like, bare minimum, if you purchase via loan, you're paying that for 3 months.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
And so holding costs. So when you budget for these types of BRRRRs, you have to budget obviously the purchase, the closing costs, the holding costs. And that's where like a lot of people get hung up, is that, they want to try to recoup all their money. It's like, if you could just recoup 60, 70% of your all-in expenses, then you can reuse that. You don't have to get 100. It's still a good deal. I mean, in a normal deal, you put down 25% and see you later. You move on, right? You don't get any money back until you sell it or refinance it. But in this, it's like, okay, if I get 60 to 70% of my capital back, that's a win. I mean, for me at least.
Oh, absolutely. Then you start calculating how much money you actually have in the deal, and your return's going to go way up because you've taken back half or more via the cash out funds.
Yeah.
It's back into your pocket.
Yeah. So want to go through a couple of specific examples of our own that we've done?
Yeah, would love to.
So I bought this duplex in New Britain, Connecticut, 87 Pennsylvania Ave. I don't own it today, but when I bought it as a BRRRR. So I purchased it for $120,000. I put 10% down. I used a hard money loan. And that's the other thing about hard money loans. A lot of them, depending on your experience level, they don't make you put 20% down. So
Correct. So like if it's your first time, you're probably looking at 25% down, done a couple deals, 20% down, you've done maybe 5 deals, 15%, 10 or more could be 10% down.
Yeah.
Like we've done a couple deals. So like, that's probably how you got,
right.
How you got that deal.
If you're new, figure 20% down. But so I put 10% down and then they funded 100% of the rehab. So I paid my 2 points at closing. So I bought it for 120. I put 10% down. That's $12,000. My closing costs were $10,000. And the reason why they were so high is because you're escrowing taxes and insurance. Sometimes your insurance is a little bit more because of the rehab and liability in there. And also the points I paid to the lender. So attorney fees, title fees, all that good stuff. So bought it for 120. My closing costs were $10K. My construction costs were $30,000. I then rented out as a duplex. I rented each unit out for $1,300. So I'm bringing in $2,600 a month now. Now I still have this hard money loan. My holding cost during this whole period was about $7,000. When I went to that new bank, I said, can I please do a cash out refinance? And they said, okay, sure. We're going to send out an appraiser. The appraiser went out. Based on other sales in the area, they thought my duplex was worth $230,000. Now, a bank's not going to give you a loan for $230,000. So they gave me 75% of that, which is pretty standard. So I have a new loan now of $172,500. I then take that and I pay off my existing debt. So I bought it for $120,000. I'm all in basically for $175,000. If I take my $120,000, my rehab, my holding costs, my closing costs, I'm all in for $175,000. I got a new loan for $172,500. So I actually had $2,500 left in the deal. So I didn't pull out all my capital, but I was in the deal I now have a cash flowing property, fully rehab, performing, and it cost me $2,500.
Wow. That's impressive. Could you imagine
so it wasn't 100%, but that's pretty damn good.
Imagine walking up to that property as it sits then and just paying $2,500 for it. That's what you did.
And now I have that original $12,000 I put down back in my pocket, a fully performing property. I can go do it all over again. And that's the power of that BRRRR process. Oh, and that cash out refinance I got is tax-free money.
Wow. Because it's loan proceeds.
Exactly.
That's impressive.
So but here's what's cool about this process is that it's scalable, whether it's a 2-family or commercial. I mean, you can do the same process. Once you understand the process, you can do it on 2 units. You can do it on 100 units. You can do it on 20 units. It's the same process. You just have to buy it right, and you have to know roughly what your ARV is going to be, and then you can back in the numbers.
It's the same math. Like with the 1 to 4 units, it's based on comps.
Yep.
And then anything above that, commercial stuff, is going to be based on the income.
Yeah,
right?
the net operating income. Yeah.
Based on whatever the cap rate is in the area.
Yep. So it was a great property. It served its purpose. I cash flowed, modestly on it, but
you sold it?
I did sell it. Yeah.
So then you made money then, assuming.
I did. Yeah. Yeah. That was the BRRRR, that was my first ever true BRRRR, and it worked out pretty well.
Yeah, let's be honest. We don't have all the money in the world, so if you can't recycle it, then it's pretty much game over. You're gonna have your one property, and that's it.
Yeah. So how about you? What was yours?
All right, let's get into this one here. This was an interesting one. I was definitely in over my head, and this was my first real BRRRR. So it was a 3-unit in New Britain. I bought it for $123,000.
Okay.
And I put 15% down, which is $18,000. You got a better deal than me. I wonder how you did that. So I put down $18,000. So I had a new initial loan amount of $105,000, right? And at the time, I thought it needed $55,000 in work. So $105,000 plus $55,000 in rehab. My ending loan balance was going to be $160,000. right? This was a foreclosure actually when you could still buy them. And believe it or not, it's so crazy to think about. This market's so wild. Like I went up to it. I took my time, took a week or two, put in my offer. It just doesn't happen now. So I bought it. I bought it for 123. I kid you not, 2 days later, all of the copper pipes were stolen.
Oh no.
Yep.
A completely vacant property.
Completely vacant.
Yeah.
Insurance wouldn't cover it, right? Because they don't cover that sort of damage like vandalism on a vacant property. Because like it's vacant. No one's living there. Like the chances of this happening is huge. So I learned like by whatever means, like have a light out there. Like,
right.
I don't know, make it happen. Like make it look like someone's there. And it was even, what was really bad was like, they didn't like come in with like a Sawzall and cut the pipes nice, right? Like they seemed like amateurs to me, but like they were like yanking on the pipes, right? So like they damaged the plaster walls, not even sheetrock, right? So like everything's damaged, mangled and everything. That cost me $5,000. That cost me $5,000 when $5,000 was, it's still a lot of money, but like it was a lot of money to me back then.
And you haven't even started construction yet.
Haven't even started.
Oh, geez.
So the other thing that I should mention is that this is the one and only time, not to say that I wouldn't do it again, but this is the one and only time I borrowed money from family.
Yeah.
So
that's a tough conversation.
Yeah. So $25,000 I borrowed from my dad to get into this deal. And actually before this podcast, when I was like kind of brushing up on these numbers, I had a printout of my bank account. I saw that $25,000 go in, and guess what my new balance on my bank account was? $26,000. Yeah.
Yeesh.
So like we're not talking about like I just want to be crystal clear. Like I did not have a lot of money to be playing with. So this new $5,000 hit that I took, like that was a big deal. Like that really hurt. Also, in looking at some documents from then when I was doing this deal, I cashed out an IRA that I completely forgot about. It was like $7,000, which wasn't a lot, but like clearly I needed it to get this deal like done because the rehab had gone so far over. So anyways, we're in this thing, we're doing the rehab. Like I finally get through it. And keep in mind, I'm in Texas, by the way.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah. So this is the one I was living in Texas. And I bought it while I was living in Texas. So I came up, looked at it. I did fly up, flew back, bought it, did that whole thing. And every once in a while I would come up for like a long weekend, and like my dad and I and my brother a few times would like, bang out some work on it. Like I was actually doing things.
Little sweat equity.
Yeah. When I actually knew how to do stuff like that. But yeah, sweat equity. So it took me a while. It was probably like a 6-month turnaround on this thing. But this was also when I was still doing rent by the room. So this was a huge three unit, and there's 3 beds per unit. So I was doing like $650 a room. I was paying all utilities though, but $650 a room times 9 is something like $5,500. That's not bad. Like once that thing finally started to fill up, I remember feeling that relief. It was like, oh, I have 1 tenant. I have 2. Like I finally felt like I could breathe.
Some money coming in finally. But and then for perspective, like so a 3-family house, 3 bedrooms, that would normally, so if you're getting $5,500 rent by the room, you would normally rent each unit out if you didn't rent by the room for what, like $1,200 to $1,300?
Back then? Yeah, 12. So like maybe $3,600 versus $5,500.
You're almost doubling it.
It's not bad.
Doubling your work.
Right.
Because it's more.
Yeah, and I was managing everything myself.
Right, but
so
that's some good numbers.
Yeah, all told, I finally got the job done. It was crazy painful. I'm glad I did it. So it appraised for $255.
So you bought for what again?
Bought for $123.
Okay.
Put 18 down. So now new initial loan amount of $105.
Yep. Spent
all that $55,000.
Yep.
I spent all that $55,000. So now my payoff is $160. So $255, I got 75% of that in a new loan, which is $191. So $191, we're going to pay off the $160. So I'm left with $31. After closing costs, I think I walked away with like 20 some odd.
But you walked away with a check from the closing table.
Which was just about enough to pay my dad.
Oh, right? That's right. You got to pay your dad.
Yeah. So I definitely had to front a couple $1,000. But Like the most important thing was to pay him back. Like
Yeah.
I literally didn't care about anything else. Like I want to pay him back. I don't care if I walk away with anything myself. Pay him back. Done. He's the investor. Like got to do right by the investor.
Yep.
And I ended up selling that property a couple years later and did, pretty well on it. But yeah, I'm so glad I just pulled the trigger and made it happen. I don't recommend cashing out like in retirement accounts, but that's what I needed to do.
Yeah,
and
you got the job
paid
done.
off. It paid off.
That's a good story. Was that your first one for like first official BRRRR?
That was my first BRRRR.
Okay.
I had
Not your first investment
No.
ever. To start with a BRRRR in your first ever purchase, it's a lot to go through because if you've never done a closing or if you've never bought a house before, to do the whole buy, renovate, rent, refinance, and repeat process, it's a lot of moving parts. It's not rocket science. A lot of people do it, but I think just going through a normal like purchase and sale, getting your feet wet, learning how to become a landlord, I think that is like a good first stepping stone. And then it's like, okay, now what? Now I want my next one. I have enough 20% down to buy it, but then I don't have enough for the third one unless I sell this first or second one, right? So then I think this process makes a lot of sense.
I think if you're willing to do what you just said, but you're willing to like sell your first property, then it works. But otherwise, I think like the biggest takeaway from this thing is like, I'll throw another R in because there's so many R's here in the BRRRR strategy, is just, I always tell people you have to be able to recycle your money.
Right.
That when someone asks me like, and I will say this, like, what is the most important takeaway what's the most important piece of advice you can give to like a real estate investor, is to be able to find a way to recycle your money,
Right.
which is what I think actually do pretty well.
Yeah.
We do that well, but
Yeah.
you have to be able to recycle it.
And also a lot of people get caught up, and I think this is important to talk about, is if you're doing the BRRRR process and you're gonna hold the property, you're not flipping it, don't over improve. Like, be reasonable with your rehab budget, but when an appraiser comes back out to appraise that property when you're going for that second, that new loan, they don't really care like if you use granite countertops or laminate countertops. So like if you're going to save a couple bucks, like it's a rental at the end of the day, make it tenant proof. We use luxury vinyl plank flooring in all of our rentals. I don't think we've ever put granite or like marble or quartz in any of them. Like you're not flipping the property, so don't over improve. You're not going to get that much more value because of it. So, I think just make them as tenant proof as possible, watertight, address any like major plumbing issues, electrical issues, hazard, liability, things like that, but don't over improve.
Yeah. You're going for, you get the top rent, whatever that top market rent is, be able to get that with whatever improvements you're making. But past that, you don't want to spend crazy money because you never know what kind of tenants you're going to get. Like, are they going to wreck your granite countertops? Like it's possible.
Yeah.
It's happened.
And holding costs. Don't forget to budget in holding costs. So when you buy it, obviously you have closing costs. That's, it is what it is. And then holding costs. So you have taxes, you have insurance, you have loss of rent for a couple months, hopefully. What else do you have? Some other holding costs.
Yeah, no, that's all good points. I was saying actually to this investor that I brought up first that was really confused about why he wasn't getting all his money back because he was talking to all his friends that were doing these BRRRRs. I was like, don't let them fool you. Like, we're not just talking about getting back your down payment. And
Right.
that's something I didn't really address on my deal was like, I was paying 10%. Like, I didn't get all my money back. Like, I'm like, the fact that you got half of your down payment back, like, let's just be grateful for that. But like, don't let them fool you. Like, you have to calculate not only just your down payment, but you're going to be doing 2 closings,
True.
right? You're going to be doing 2 closings. You're going to have holding costs at X% over the life of the original loan, insurance.
And then every time you're using a hard money loan, every time you do a draw, it costs money as well. It's only a couple $100, but like, you buy a house, you do a roof, it's a line item, spend the $20,000. You ask for the draw, it's going to cost probably $150, $200 to have that lender send out an inspector, we'll say, to approve that the work was done, and then they'll release the funds.
Right. They want to cover their costs to send the inspector out and to send that wire plus some.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, probably the biggest holding cost is the interest you're paying holding the loan.
Yeah. And
I would
it's
imagine.
gone up over the years. Like in doing this research for these deals we were just talking about, I think we were paying like 8 or 9%. Like it's not
I mean, we're in a
8 or
deal
nine
right.
percent's good these
Yeah,
days.
we're in a deal now. We're paying 12%.
Yeah. Yeah. 12%. I quote people all day 10, 10, 11, 12. If you've got no experience and kind of a poor FICO, you're like upper 12s.
Yeah.
But keep in mind, like you've got to calculate that based on your hold time, right? Like a lot of people are like, whoa, like I'm buying $100,000 property. Let's just say the loan amount's 100 and at 12%, that's $12,000 a year. But if you're keeping it for like a couple months, then it's only a couple $1,000s. Like you got to figure out how long you're actually going to be holding
Right.
that
Yeah, it
note.
makes sense.
Yeah.
So again, just to recap, BRRRR model: you buy, you renovate, you rent, you refinance, and then you repeat. And it's a very repeatable process. It's scalable. You pull out, you refinance your money tax-free, which is an amazing part of the process. And you have a now turnkey or performing property that hopefully cash flows. And it's okay not to get all your capital back, but if you can get 50, 60, 70% of your capital back, then I think that's a win.
It's the best way to scale.
Yeah. So if you liked what you heard, be sure to give us a like and subscribe. Just remember, sky's the limit. Dive deep and invest in how you want to live.
See you next week.